Okay, there we go. I was going to say it's a little dark. And let's put this higher up. There we go. Shrink it sideways. There we go. I love how this lady makes it look like I'm even more cockeyed. I am awful quiet, aren't I? Let me see what I can do about that. Testing, testing. That is still really quiet. Hey, Michael. I'm still trying to figure out my audio. For me, it sounds very quiet. It could also just be that my heat is on and okay, we'll roll with it. Hopefully I am functional for this. It has been one hell of a week. Well, hell. Do you want to start with the Glock versus M9, or do you want to start with the PDP? It's amazing how I look like the littlest bit over to the side, and it looks like I'm looking massively to this side. I mean, it's not like it matters. Since I've got them in order of M9 versus Glock and then PDP in my notes, we'll start with the M9 versus Glock. Let me move these around a little bit. There we go. So there's a couple things to remember with the XM9 trials. And one of those is just out of amusement. The Army was not actually looking for a new pistol. They were not interested. They were perfectly happy with what they had. They had a couple. Let me get the echo off of my other screen here. Okay, there we go. I'm also watching this on my laptop, and it was talking to me. So the Army was not interested. They were perfectly happy with the 1911 still. They were using some revolvers, they were using some other guns, but for the most part, they were good. The Air Force was looking for a pistol. The Navy was kind of looking for pistols, but they always were. They were mostly looking for things for the Navy SEALs. And what started this was some freaking troublemaker, I don't know who, I didn't get that bit of information, brought up to Congress that, hey, there's an awful lot of pistols in the U.S. supply chain, in the military supply chain. Maybe we should standardize this. Maybe we should reduce this, because they, particularly between the Navy and the Air Force, they kept, like, each area of them each department internally would like, we need a pistol for this. We need a pistol for that. Because compared to the Army, pistols are a primary weapon. Not in the sense that they're using them for their primary function, but compared to a rifle, they use pistols a lot. Your MPs, your security guards, officers in general are the primary users for pistols. Well, compared to the Army, that represents most of the small arms in the other branches. And so from their point of view, this was something where they were getting, okay, this department wants this, so they get some of those. This department wanted those. And somebody said, this is stupid. You guys need to standardize. And the Army was like, well, I mean, we're good. Leave us out. And it went round and round a couple times until finally they said, no. The service branches are all getting the same pistol deal. And so it ended up back on the Army's plate to choose. The criteria came down, and it was basically Aberdeen Proving Grounds testing things. So yeah, they got stuck with it, but they didn't want it. Another interesting fact is that the third contender, which was eliminated kind of mistakenly, the Army came back later and said, oops, we shouldn't have eliminated it. It wasn't intentional. We weren't like maliciously going after it. But when we were looking at test results, we misinterpreted some things and didn't necessarily treat it as fairly as we could have. And that was the Smith & Wesson, basically a Model 59, but with a few tweaks. Glocks weren't even available when this started. This all started in like 80 to 81. The Glock 17 came out in 82. So even in the 83 to 84 trials, it was a brand new gun. They may have not even been able to meet the requirements of the trial just as a manufacturer, because can they guarantee production? Unknown. But they certainly didn't meet the requirements set forth for the gun. The Army, and then particularly the Army, but also the other branches, don't treat handguns the way the civilian market does. So I'm going to run through the M9's issues as far as I'm concerned. Not for me personally, not for civilian use, but for a government contract like this. And then we're going to look at the positives. The main bad thing is they all boil down to the same thing: size. It is a bulky gun. The grip is bulky. The placement of controls requires relatively large hands. Even average size male hands will have trouble operating that gun quickly, efficiently, as smoothly as other options. It's not so much that the gun is poorly made as it was designed for an adult male with above average hands. And anybody else had to adapt. You had to deal with it. Well, that doesn't work so well for a universal service pistol. And it doesn't work even as well as it did for them for police departments and then the later military. As the military went gender neutral, shall we say, that became a bigger and a bigger issue. The safety placement up on the slide, less than ideal, particularly, and here's where it gets key, the military has a manual of arms for handguns. They do not carry them with the round in the chamber. They do not carry them, cocked and locked. That's the kind of thing that, okay, the special forces may do that. An entry team for MPs may do that if they're using the pistol as a primary weapon. But for the most part, it's in the holster. Maybe it's got a loaded magazine with the hammer down, and very often the safety on an empty chamber. Well, if you've got the safety on or off, and you go to rack the slide on a Beretta, you can change that position of that safety. You can accidentally decock it as you're letting go of it. You can do all sorts of stupid things because of where that safety is. It's right where you're putting your hands. And did it happen regularly? No. Is it a huge issue? No. But it's an unnecessary potential issue. It's interesting that the Smith & Wesson has the same issue. The biggest competitor that didn't was the SIG, which was the P226, that has the decocker on the frame, but it didn't have a thumb safety. And the military kind of wanted one. I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons the SIG didn't win, regardless of the price point, which is why they claim the Beretta one, is it didn't have the thumb safety. And the military is old school. Other issues, production cost. They did come in cheaper. The original price was $178 per unit. They were basically selling them to the US government at cost. That was what it was going to cost Beretta USA to import them from Italy, with the idea being they would build a facility here and hope they could produce them for what it cost them to get them from Italy. I don't know if that actually worked. I don't know if it was more or less than the Italian plant, but I know that they made out like bandits because the other contracts that they got because they had the military contract, as long as they didn't lose too much money on the US government contract, they made their money back on police and private sales. So those are the main negatives. And they all boil down to purchasing a pistol that is more suited to an adult male with larger than normal hands, just above average. I mean, not massively, but just above average. And then giving it to everybody. Because if you look at what a pistol is for in the US military, that's a very unisex role. Even back in the 80s, you weren't limited to combat troops. In fact, the combat troops were a very small percentage of the people that were going to be using pistols. So you have a higher percentage of your female soldiers, officers, certainly are not necessarily going to be above average in size. It just overall was in my opinion, an error. The positives from the military point of view of the M9, not necessarily compared to the Glock on a couple of these, but just in general, the reliability. It really did well on the reliability tests. Most of the failures that we kind of pin on the M9 later, they basically boil down to we beat the crap out of them. Oh, they had decided on 9 as the standard before it even started. That was part of the whole process. It was only 9. And a lot of that came down to recoil. A lot of that came down to capacity, and also just NATO. They were trying to standardize on a round that the rest of the freaking world wanted. But a very large chunk of it was we want a high capacity gun that anybody can shoot. They got that part right. They didn't think that through on the grip size, but they wanted something that the wide variety of people could use. 45 has a lot of recoil. 40 didn't really exist. 10 millimeter was not an option. They certainly weren't doing 357 Magnum. They'd already thrown out 38. Part of the problem was they had various groups using 38, some using 45, some using 357, some using 9 millimeter, and they wanted to standardize. They wanted to pick one, and the only one of them that worked was the other NATO standard at 9 millimeter. Really, Cat. So the reliability was there, but that was true of all 3 of the final contenders, and then they threw out the Smith & Wesson. The hammer fired. They didn't specifically say it. It wasn't. They might have, but it wasn't like a huge criteria. But again, the U.S. government at the time, very traditional. The military is they're very old school. They wanted the ability to do a repeat strike. They wanted to stick with something they knew. And the modern striker system at the time was pretty new. Um, Strikers had been out for a while, nothing new there. But the modern system we now use was pretty new. Specifically, they wanted the second strike ability. They wanted a double action. They didn't necessarily care about double single, but double action only wasn't really a thing at the time. But they wanted the ability, if it didn't go bang, pull the trigger again, hammer comes back, hammer comes forward, maybe it goes bang. Metal frame. All the pistols reviewed were metal framed. Again, now we know the polymer is okay. It works. It holds up. At the time, nobody really had a freaking clue. And it fits the military mindset of process-based safety. The military works on the assumption that we have idiots and we don't know which ones are the idiots. And we assign jobs not based on individual capability. Now, you might have an MOS based on individual testing, but say you're doing a guard duty. They don't pick and choose who gets guard duty from among the pool of possible candidates based on who's not going to screw up with this pistol clearing it every day. Because unlike the police, unlike the civilian world, in the military, you go on guard duty. So you're going to be starting your shift. You go to the armory, you draw a pistol, you draw ammo, load your magazine. If you're chambering around, you chamber around, you holster the pistol. At the end of your shift, you then have to clear that pistol and turn it all back in. Those are the moments you screw up and accidentally shoot. That's how you get negligent discharges. And the military sidesteps that by their procedure. They don't want a round in the chamber. They don't want a system that doesn't have a safety where you can rack the slide and not have the gun not safe. They'd already had that in the 1911. And that's where the whole, nothing in the chamber thing came from. So they work based on a process as opposed to assuming that the individual is competent and won't screw up a not inherently safe process. The only time you chamber around in the military is when you're going to shoot. I mean, that's their general principle. If you're chambering live ammo, you are then going to shoot live ammo. Not you're chambering live ammo and then you are piddling along on your guard duty and you're probably never shooting. In a combat zone, that's all different scenario. But remember, pistols are mostly, from their point of view, you're pulling guard duty on a ship. You're the officer of the watch. You're, whatever it is, you're on gate duty. You're, in the Air Force, you're just standing watch on an aircraft. Whatever it is, you're probably just there for, formalities. You are not really expected to stop an armed attack. So, skip through my notes since I ad-libbed through a lot of this. They've been doing the same thing since they switched from revolvers, basically. That manual of arms started when they started going to automatics. So I already touched on it, but one of the problems you run into is a lot of those roles where a pistol becomes your primary weapon. You're probably not even carrying a rifle. They are roles that, particularly in the Air Force and the Navy, but even now in the Army, they were filled by both genders on a relatively more equal basis than other roles. because they're non-combat roles. They're roles where gender equality could be a thing. And if you're talking about a military that didn't have to fake gender equality and was actually willing to and able to go, well, I mean, what jobs can women do and not have a handicap? Well, I mean, if your job is to stand here and make sure that everybody going through has the proper pass, and otherwise to sound an alarm, and you're not really expected to be like arm wrestling the person, that can be a woman. No harm, no foul. They are doing the job that needs done. An officer. Well, in most most non-combat roles, particularly for the Air Force and the Navy, there is no problem with that being a woman, at least in terms of the job. Gender stereotypes at the time, how that worked out socially, I'm not, going to get into. But physically, they can do the job. So they went and picked a pistol that the woman has a harder time using. The SIG and the Smith & Wesson are both easier for somebody with average or smaller than average male, which means pretty much every woman, hands. If you're a woman with very large hands, great, it works. But yeah, that's one of the reasons that when they went to the new pistol, they went with something that even the standard size grip on the M17, most women don't have a problem with. It is a good grip for pretty large hands all the way down to pretty small hands, even without changing the grip out. Glock would have worked. It would not have met their other requirements in terms of systems. Reliability, it certainly would have passed. Accuracy and all that, it would have passed. But it wouldn't have met the military requirements for how they want to operate. And we can argue about whether they make sense. And certainly the military has adopted the Glock in many different units now. And police departments have different rules. They liked Glock. They liked Glocks because it fit the same as a revolver in terms of how you use it. Where they didn't like the Glocks, where they didn't like the Berettas, was the same thing the military screwed up. And a lot of them went to Berettas and then very quickly moved away because they found that the grip is not practical for a lot of people, and that safety is not quick. If you are carrying, even with the round in the chamber and the safety on, I mean, I have decent sized hands. I mean, I don't have small hands. It's not the fastest thing in the world for me to draw an M9 from the holster or a 92 from the holster, get that safety off, get my thumb back down, and be on target. Compared to pretty much every other system out there, it's lousy. On the other hand, the Berettas are slick. They look nice. They have decent triggers. They got some style. They got some flair. The Glock is a freaking square piece of Tupperware soulless crap that just works really well. So is what it is. But yeah, they got chewed out because of the Smith & Wesson thing. They got chewed out because supposedly they leaked pricing, which turned out to be bullshit. The Smith & Wesson thing actually turned out to be true. They did accidentally it turned out to not be intentional at all. It was literally, even in the court, because Smith & Wesson sued, but the person presenting the information in court wasn't even aware of really what happened. And the court looked at the information and said, that's reasonable. It turned out the reality was what had been done was not in keeping with what they were supposed to do, but it was kind of a sequence of screw-ups, not somebody going, well, screw Smith & Wesson. On the other hand, I don't think the Smith & Wesson would have won anyway because they would have been too expensive. That was not a cheap gun to produce. I don't know how the Beretta came in at that price point. The Beretta is not a cheap gun to produce either. I'm betting that the U.S. produced Berettas were significantly more, and they just ate it. So that is where you're at on that. The Walther PDP and the PDP Pro SD, which is a bizarre. I don't know where the SD comes from in that because it's not a self-defense gun. And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm pretty sure I picked up a PDP in the like store once, but I have not shot one. I don't personally know anybody who's shot one, and I have not put my eyes on a Pro SD because they're just coming out at SHOT Show. So, oh, is that what that is? Okay, that makes sense. I don't know why the SD though. Like SR, silencer ready. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's Walther. It probably means something in German, right? But yeah, it makes sense. So a lot of this is going to be conjecture. A lot of this is going to be based on watching some YouTube videos on it, reading up on what Walther had to say about it, and things like that. My thoughts kind of mirror Mr. Guns and Gear. I think that the regular PDP as a general purpose gun, even a carry gun in the compact version, not bad. Mechanically decent. I don't have any issue with the optics system. I think that I understand why people were paranoid about it, but usually the ones who were most paranoid about it didn't understand what Walther had actually done. Walther had done something where the screws forced the optics plate forward against the front wall of that cutout. And it wasn't just sitting in there floating and relying on the screws. So you add that to the friction, you're not just relying on the screws, you actually have the friction of the plate against the slide. Is it optimal? Is it the best possible system? Or is it good enough to do the job? I can't find anybody who has an actual documented, my screws broke, my system broke, whatever, on a PDP. So apparently it's a non-issue. Walther changed it on the SD, but even they said we're changing it because people were paranoid about it, and this way there's just nothing for them to bitch about. To me, that's just good marketing. It is what it is. That is the only change, according to them, that you cannot just buy the part and put it on your SD or your PDP. Everything else is just factory upgrades already in place. The upgraded trigger, it's a race gun trigger. That's all that is. It's not a competition, or it's not a self-defense trigger. It is a competition trigger. The barrel, you can just swap out the barrels. I mean, if you've got a PDP and you want to have the threaded barrel, go for it. I actually don't like threaded barrels unless I'm putting a suppressor on it. It sticks out further. There's more to go wrong. It's one more thing that to have to deal with. And it makes it so if you're using holsters, they have a bottom to them. It's in the way. If you don't have a bottom to it, now you got something sticking out the bottom of your barrel or bottom of your holster. The magwell, I mean, if you want a big magwell, great. If you don't, whatever. All those things are things you could buy and put on it. It's just cheaper if you want most of them to buy the new one. Price point, if that's what you want, I'm mixed. They're into the mid 800s, and for what is otherwise not anything special, I don't know. Mid 800s, you can buy a factory Glock, put a magwell on it, and put a good trigger in it, and you're at roughly the same price. Now, is that better? Probably not, to be honest. But you're into a more standard model, more universal model, more known brand. Not necessarily name recognition in general, but like Glock has a better reputation than Walther. Walther has had some good lemons. They've really screwed the pooch a few times. They make some really good stuff. They make some not so great stuff. Um, so the regular one at $650, I think, is too expensive. I think that it needs to be $550, at the most $600, because there are a whole lot of guns that are functionally identical in terms of quality and performance that are that much cheaper. You start hitting 650 and now you're into a different tier gun. You have left the Glock SIG P320 kind of range and you've gone into the mid-range HKs, some of the nicer SIGs, a upgraded Glock. I just think that for a base model that doesn't have anything particularly special about it, the optics ready is not special anymore. My SIG, you can get one now optics ready for the same kind of money, a little less. The Pro SD is under 800 because that's not what they were saying at SHOT Show. I know the regular one it's like 625 or something, at the store. Okay. So yeah, I mean, if they're coming in anywhere 750 to 800, that's now you're getting into competitive, because now you're beating upgrading something else to be on par with it. So yeah, I still don't think they're going to sell a shitload, but I think for Walther in that category, I think they'll do pretty well then. I think that in terms of it's very high tier for the price range. I think that is a bunch of marketing. I think that none of these pistols are worth what they cost. And that boils down to that kind of trigger system. They all suck. They just all suck. You're talking about something that is designed to be a safe system, a reliable system, and then they try to make it a good shooting system. And just having a fast reset, a short pull, all that kind of thing, that doesn't make it a nice trigger pull. I think that people who are doing a pure race gun don't care. That short reset's going to be extremely popular. That's the kind of thing people pay real money for to get done on a Glock or a SIG. But otherwise, I didn't see anything on that thing, on the standard or the new one, that I was like, ooh, that's worth a bunch of money to me. It doesn't even look particularly great. I understand that the grip feels really good, and I agree, it looks like it probably does. But so do a lot of things. And that's not money. Like that doesn't cost them any more to do than the square stupidity of the Glock. So to me, I don't look at it as that's worth more money. I look at it as, why the hell isn't everybody at least on par with that? Which is what the SIG did. Some of the HKs, some of the CZs, and so on. They are already doing that. Glock is just stuck in 1982, at least in terms of that. That said, I think that the biggest handicap is not the gun, it is Walther. And it's not so much there's anything actually wrong with Walther. It's that Walther is not Glock, SIG, Smith & Wesson, HK. No, I mean, it's not a fault of the gun. It's one of those, if you want me to agree, from a marketing perspective that you're worth the money, give me something that somebody else doesn't give me for less. And the best way I can put it is I can go to the store and buy a SIG P320 that, from a functional standpoint, beats the PDP. There are significant advantages. Functionally, it is just a better gun for less. I can upgrade the trigger in the SIG to be better, because the PDP, if I remember correctly, has a better trigger than the SIG from the factory when you're starting out. But for a very modest sum, I can upgrade the trigger in the SIG. The upgraded trigger to the PDP Pro SD, you're talking real money. Like, that's a big, expensive upgrade. They're doing more with it. I mean, don't get me wrong, they did more, but that's only valuable to the few people actually able to use that in a race gun format. On the standard one, I think it should be $500. I think that if the SIG is $500, the Glock is $500, the equivalent HK is roughly $500, the Smith & Wessons are $500. Why is the Walther more? And I understand why. They are doing smaller volume. They are doing customer service that is beyond anything anybody else is doing. But that doesn't change that for most people buying the gun, they spent more money and didn't get more. That said, it's not like it's outrageously priced. It's not like the base model is $750 and you get it and you're like, wait a minute, it's not gold plated. So it's not way out of line. It's just, I think there should be more or less money. Either give me more or charge me less. And it could be as simple as throwing another mag. I mean, mags aren't cheap. Give me another mag or two, and okay, now you've cut $50 off my price effectively. I'm okay with that. I think that's one of the things Glock does well is a lot of the Glock packages are a bunch of mags. Well, mags are dirt cheap from Glock, but now I don't have to go buy them. And I'm not a Glock guy, but like if you're buying a Glock and you want one of their packages that comes with a bunch of mags because you don't want to go buy the mags separately, they can knock off less of the price in that than you're really saving. And you'll be happy because you don't have to go spend it separately. Now, when it comes to I want to go to the store, buy a ready-to-go race gun. Not, super high-level competition, but like me. Somebody who's a good shot, has some training, is just not a super competitive shooter. Like, that isn't what I do. So I don't want to go spend $2,000, $3,000 on something to go shoot at the club matches. That's a pretty good setup. And the fact that it's different, it's not going to feel the same as my other setups, isn't really a handicap because I'm going to have a different holster. I'm going to be using it differently. I'm going to be drilling differently. The fact that it feels different is not a handicap. So in that sense, I think that would be great because I'm getting something that I might otherwise spend 2 or 3 times more money on that is good enough. they're not charging me for a bunch of shit I don't need. One of my issues with a lot of the so-called entry-level race guns is they're spending money on things that the average person does not care about. They're not going to help you. They're not going to improve your score. And I don't have any problem with those features. I think they're great. A lot of them, I mean, as a second race gun, I know what the hell I want and I can afford it kind of thing, great. But for the person going, well, I went to one match at my local club and I got my ass handed to me because my gun was slow as hell. And it wasn't just me. The gun physically was a handicap. But that's all I'm doing. I'm never going to go past my local club matches. I don't want to spend real money on this. You keep it under $1,000 for the gun, the mags you need, and a holster for it. Race gun holsters aren't cheap. Well, you keep that all under $1,000, and that's a lot easier to swallow. It's a lot easier to get past, any wife or girlfriend or whatever as well. When it's $2,000, $3,000, for the average guy, that's a little more of a chunk. The other thing I was looking at that made me, I don't know, not positive, wasn't anything to do with the gun, had to do with Walther's push of their warranty thing, their coverage, their buyback policy. I understand why they have it. I even agree that it's a good thing. But the fact that they do it and nobody else does it, a lot of people are going to look at that and go, why are you not confident in your gun? Why are you so concerned that people aren't going to like it? That there's going to be problems. And I mean, is that fair? Not really. They're just trying to stand behind their product. They're just trying to say, we're confident enough that we'll eat the money. Well, I mean, there are perfectly, well, there are plenty of people who are really into it. And, I mean, there are people who race motorcycles or cars or boats. They spend way more. So if your thing is, IPSC style competition, even if you're not sponsored and competing really for money, $3,000 on the gun and then whatever you're spending on ammo and travel, is what it is. I don't get into that kind of stuff. I'm not in that world, and I certainly don't have that kind of budget on a regular basis. But, I can certainly remember spending way too much money on some of my hobbies. And I mean, I've got plenty of friends where even at the club level, just for recreation, dropping $3,000 would not faze them in the slightest. If it was something they wanted to do, whatever. The range I used to belong to when I was in Connecticut was the oldest range in New England. It may have been the oldest range in the U.S. Oldest, private, still open range. And it was the Hartford Gun Club, if you want to look it up to figure out which one it is. I can't remember what the exact details, but they were the oldest of something. And I mean, you'd pull in, and when I was driving my BMWs, I was the cheap car. It was not uncommon to see a row of, Porsches, high-end Range Rovers, the occasional Ferrari, Bentleys. I had a couple Rolls Royce parked next to each other once. And, they get out and they've got their, little case with their shotgun, and they pick which set of barrels they're going to put on, and, put on their little custom fitted vest and a couple boxes of shells, and they go shoot some trap or skeet or sporting clays, and get back in their $200,000 car and go home. And those were the guys that would show up at the rifle range or pistol range portion with thousands and thousands of dollars worth of hardware that they couldn't shoot to save their life. I watched a gentleman who very clearly, extremely wealthy gentleman, older, 70s, somewhere in there, with his wife in the indoor pistol range, and he couldn't hit the target. This is an indoor pistol range. The target was not all the way to the far end. He could not hit the target. He was trying to teach his wife how to shoot the handgun. And after he managed to hit the ceiling a couple times, and not way down range, but like above his target, I packed my stuff up and got out of there. But I'm betting that he is a truly excellent shotgunner. I'm also betting that he has not fired a pistol more than a few times in his entire life, and was just nervous about the current state of affairs and decided to dig it out of the closet, and thought he would teach the wife how to do something he doesn't know how to do. He was shooting a very nice, very expensive, customized 1911. And, the gun was worth more than everything I had brought with me that day. And, I doubt he even blinked at the price tag. So, different strokes for different folks. They keep that kind of gun available, because if it wasn't for those folks, the guns would cost even more because they'd sell that many fewer of them. It's just a fact of life. Yeah, that was my thought too. Oh my God, I'm getting out of here before he starts hitting the wall and it ricochets back at me. It was scary, but wasn't going to go get into it with him. Wasn't, just pack up. I'll go to the outdoor range. It was a little chilly, but I'm going to the outdoor range. But I mean, then you'd also have the guys that, the company I was working for at the time, our warehouse manager was the first person I knew who owned a Wilson Combat. Right. When you'd think, wouldn't you? It would at least be somewhere, in the general direction. I mean, he's literally shooting at not a full-size silhouette target, but like a 2/3 silhouette target, 15 feet from him. There were no holes on that paper when I left. It was truly impressive. I was embarrassed at the shooting in my fast forward range trip video, because I haven't shot my pistols in a while. I was shooting a pistol I'm not comfortable with, and the sights were off, and that barrel sucks. But I still should have done better than that. So, the guy next to me, not next to, but like a couple bays over, he would do slow fire, fast fire. His target looked like you took a shotgun to it. There were holes everywhere. I couldn't tell where he was trying to shoot. There were literally just holes everywhere. People can't shoot. The average person cannot hit the broadside of a barn, and they think they can. They think they're good. It is just a fact of life. I mean, we make fun of like police officers for being like stereotypically bad shots, but compared to the average person, they're not. It's just that the average person doesn't usually carry a gun on a regular basis. It's the average person who carries a gun actually goes to the range somewhat regularly, more than once a decade. And at least hey, I can hit the freaking silhouette from 5 feet away or 10 feet away most of the time. So yeah, I mean, I have taken many, many people to the range and gone over basics. We had the advantage of the range was the indoor range there had a room for training. And then you would go into the actual range portion, and they had a big whiteboard, and they had, uh, like demo targets with the, if you're going here, you're probably doing this and so on and all that. And they would hold classes there. But I would use that area with people I was taking to the range who were not regular shooters. Like they were new to this or hadn't done it in a long time. And we would go over basics, and I would say, look, this is going to sound really stupid and simple. And it's going to come across almost insulting that I'm treating you like a child, but you're about to do something that people often think they can do because they saw it on TV. They pretended. And then in practice, it's very different. It doesn't feel like it should be different, but when you're actually trying to hit the target, you close your eyes at the last second and you yank the gun off target. You yank the trigger instead of squeezing the trigger. I see it all the time, even on people who should know better on YouTube. They bring their finger to the trigger, and then all of a sudden it's smack, smack, smack. And then you see them reset, and their finger comes off the trigger and then straight all the way to the back. And I'm like, if the target was at 5 feet away, you would have missed. And okay, I mean, I'm certainly not blameless. I watch some of my shooting videos, and I'm like, Jesus, could you do better on that? But I don't claim to be a great speed shooter for pistol, and I'm not fast, particularly with a rifle. Have never been. If you want fast, accurate shots at like middle to long distance, sure. Long being relative. I mean, not if you're talking relatively rapid fire, not way out there stuff. That I'm also good at, but that's a whole different skill set. But certainly, when I would compete with friends in casual competition, if we were doing something where you were so close to the target that it was a speed only thing, I usually was not going to win. Like that was just, I was not fast enough. Whereas when we put the target a little further out, or we made the part where you scored it a benefit to be more accurate, now I could win. That was what I was going to dominate. And we always use a joke that, one of my buddies was named John. And I'm like, if your goal was to scare the crap out of him and put a bunch of holes in him, John's going to win. If they are close enough to be a real threat, John wins. He is going to fill that guy full of holes so fast they're not going to know what happened. On the other hand, when they get out of the hospital, they're going to be awful pissed off. Me? Well, they might manage to shoot me too because I'm not that fast. But on the other hand, they're dead. That motherfucker's got 3 through the heart and it's over. Hopefully they missed me, because they had that half second. So, it is what it is. It's why I've never been a great athlete, is I do not have that super fast twitch response, hand-eye coordination. With me, it is either muscle memory drill, or I've practiced the fundamentals over and over and over and over, and I'm just executing fundamentals. That doesn't mean I can do it super fast. But yeah, it is always amazing to me how bad people can be and how good people can be. I see people whose recoil control skills make me so jealous. There was, who was it? Oh, I want to say it was, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but effectively, John would have stopped it too. Like, I mean, he put 3 or 4 in the guy's chest. He just didn't ever, like, they weren't center of mass. It was like here, 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 you know. Um, well, yeah, pistol's harder to shoot well. I think that it's easier to get the bare basics with a rifle, and then it's easier to do pretty well with a rifle. Um, but that middle ground where you're trying to really, like, the practical realm, you know, you've gotten past the basics, but you're not an expert. There's some advantages to pistol. And a lot of it comes down to the distances involved, um, because people don't aim. People, when you speed up the drill and you tell somebody hit that, and you don't tell them to hit the exact, you know, they have to shoot for score and they have to get a 10. People don't aim. People are pointing. And at short range, it's actually easier to point a pistol. We can point. I can point at something very instinctively. If you hand them a rifle, until they got a lot of practice, pointing a rifle is hard. Now, if you tell them to actually, like, shoot for score carefully, rifle. Exactly. But people have trouble with it. It's easy to tell them that, and then they don't get it. They don't follow through. I mean, I have friends who are great shots, but trying to get them to shoot a group, they can't do it because they can't get through their head that they need to aim at the exact same spot. That they need to let it settle into the exact same rhythm. On target bang is kind of their mentality. Um, yeah, I mean, and point shooting works even 15, 20 feet if your goal is just hit the target. And there are people who are really good at it 15, 20 feet, and they'll shoot you in the heart every time. They'll shoot you in the head every time. There was a time period where I could do that. I won't tell you how many rounds that took. It was disgusting. I actually started doing it with laser tag, and you remember the original laser tag with, like, the black sleek handguns and the big white rifle, and you had the little sensors that you put on a harness. Well, I put the sensor on the far side of a pool table, and I had that pistol, the, you know, sleek black thing, in the holster, the laser tag holster, and draw, point, fire, draw, point, fire. And I had it on the narrow setting. And what I did is I had a piece of white paper, like a big piece of poster board behind it, and you would catch the flash of the red if you missed. Like, you'd be able to see where you high, low, left, right. And I was stuck at my grandparents' for the summer, and I brought the laser tag stuff, and I could do regular shooting in their house too, but only with my grandfather. Like, he had to be with me. And he was busy all the time. You know, he'd go shooting with me regularly, but not every day, not as many hours as I wanted to do it. And I'd set that sucker up, and I mean, hours, hours and hours. I think I probably averaged 2 or 3 hours a day all summer. And then I started doing it with a 22. And okay, you know, got it with a 22. I was not old enough to be shooting anything else with a handgun, but a little later on in life, okay, now I'm at a good range to be screwing around like this. And it's a downhill slope. I'm shooting, downhill. So if I screw up and shoot high, it still hits the ground. And, you set up a target 10 feet away. Okay, 15 feet away, 20 feet away. Okay, now it's a smaller target, so on. And I was doing it with my HK USP Compact in 40. And I could do it double action or I could do it single action. And stupid amounts of ammo. But yeah, I could hit like something this big consistently from the draw, just boom. And I mean, could not do it to save my life now, probably. I haven't tried it in a long time. But I mean, I do practice it as a dry fire drill. Boom. And then I look, how is this pointed? Is it roughly on target for where I wanted it to be? Because like you said, bad breath distance, you're not going to bring the gun up and, point. You're going to be lucky if you get past like tilting it forward. It's one of those things where, not run over a cat here. One of my drills is shove off, bang, 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 because you're pushing and either you're moving away from them or you're just pushing them away far enough that you can get the gun clear of the holster and they can't grab it immediately. Because if you're in somebody's face, you're trying to draw a gun and point it at them. That's awful tough. There's not a lot of room there. And, give them a good push. It distracts them a little bit from what you're doing. I mean, how valid it would really be, I don't know. I've never had that particular scenario work out. But, if you watch what cops deal with, very often the person is right in their face. When things go south, when that person goes to grab for a knife or a gun, they're already right in their face. Giving yourself that little bit of room. But yeah, you're not 99 times out of 100. If it's a self-defense shooting, there was none of this. Like that didn't happen. Yeah, it's fun at the range. It's great for, drills and competition, but in real self-defense, if they're far enough away that I need to do that, probably shouldn't be shooting them. I should probably be getting out of there. I'm not military. I'm not police. I'm not a security guard. If they're far enough away that I can get the hell out of there and get behind cover and, book it, I'm out of here. I'm a pretty brave individual, but yeah, if they're going to be shooting back, I got better things to be doing. There is no percentage of me sticking around for the gunfight if I don't have to. I don't win a prize because I got to shoot them. So I don't know. Douglas, are you still there? Because it doesn't say anybody's in here. Because otherwise we're going to call it a night at an hour. Oh, son of a bitch, my backup still failed because there's not enough space. Okay, so I'm guessing Douglas departed. So I'm going to call it a night. Take care, have fun, stay safe, everybody. Ciao.